So is it kind of up to the individual to take an account of their life and then to say, okay, there's something wrong here. I need to get some assistance with this part of my life?
I would say early on though, like in my EMS career, I never really put two and two together. So I remember one of the first times that I ever experienced like PTSD symptoms or like had a flashback. And I didn't know that's what it was at all. I mean, I just thought it was just this weird event.
What was the experience? Not without reliving it.
So no, it's fine. You know, so I had this really rough call early on. We responded to a young girl. She was 21, pregnant, like 8.5 months, something like that, about to deliver. And the call just came out as a cardiac arrest. We respond. Her father was doing CPR on her. She was naked, you know, laying on the floor. There's not a lot of details of what the hell happened on scene. Her boyfriend's naked as well. Apparently they've been having sex. She got up. She said, hey, I'm thirsty. Had a seizure, hit the ground, didn't respond thereafter. They thought she'd had a seizure. Her the boyfriend goes and gets the father. Father recognized right away she's pulseless, start CPR on her. So we get there.
Good man.
Inevitably, we, start working her. She's in VFib initially, a shocker. She goes to systole. I inevitably end up doing CPR on her for about 45 minutes on the way to the hospital with no avail, And the whole time I'm just trying my absolute best to just try to keep this baby alive, because originally we actually had fetal heart tones on the child. And then I was kind of afraid to like stop doing CPR to even check fetal heart tones again, because I was afraid that period of time of no CPR would even, maybe potentially do it. So we're just ventilating the mother and doing CPR, and every now and then intermittently get a pulse back, but it was just kind of a sketchy situation. I had another really traumatic call that same night, involving a child that got decapitated in a car wreck and all this. I'm driving home from the shift, like normal, just finish up my paperwork, head out, and I'm going through this intersection, and I'd actually ran a wreck at the same intersection a few shifts prior. That was really, really bad. We had to fly out this patient, whatever. And I'm going to drive through it, and I just got this like horrible flashback from this accident that I just ran there, where, this woman was essentially, screaming when we got on scene, and, all the details of it were just like I was reliving it, just like it just walked right up on scene again. I was sitting there, and the light had turned green, and then it had turned red again, and then it had now turned to green again. That I had just been sitting there and never even went. I was just sitting there like reliving this event. And I was like, holy shit, my heart rate's like through the roof, Like, it's just really, really, really high right now. I was having like a full-fledged panic attack. And I was like, I never really had that before, So at first I'm like, oh my God, I must just have like an arrhythmia, I probably just need to go to the hospital, And then I'm like, no, wait, like, it's probably not that. It's probably just anxiety. Like, don't freak out, I'm trying not to let it spiral and, drive the rest of the way home. Well, they started happening really regularly, These little things, I would relive events that I had had. And I've always felt like in working EMS, I held the importance of what I was doing a lot higher than other medics. You know what I mean? And so I think that the reason why I always experienced a little bit more symptoms thereafter is because I always felt like what I was doing was really important. Some people just kind of shrug it off and just like, yeah, well, you win some and lose some. I never really felt that way personally. So I think that was, a nature of why I always experienced a little bit more, symptoms than others. But I didn't know that was just PTSD at the time. And I was like, 20, probably 22, maybe. It was the first time I'd ever really experienced it. And there wasn't anything like, oh, I better go see a therapist. I better go work on this and things like this, None of that was there. And there was no critical incident stress management. There wasn't anybody who approached me and was like, hey, are you okay after these calls? Like, you just dealt with 2 traumatic calls in one night. Like, do you want to talk about it? Are you okay? None of that. It was just because, it was a rural 911 system. So, they didn't have access to services like that. When I got into flight, we'd run many calls per shift that were like that, you know what I mean? Yeah,
because you're on a helicopter, right?
yeah. The intensity's higher.
Yeah.
And and there's plenty of regular calls in the mix. But long story short, I started to have symptoms from time to time again, even after I'd been through a lot of therapy at this point and stuff like this. But at this point, I kind of knew what to do about it. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay.
Isn't it everything about the choice that they're making? I mean, everything from the moment that they decide that they do or don't want help. It's like it's a choice, right? You're going to say, okay, I'm going to go do this now. I have some intention behind it. And it's the same with you. Like you've already made the choice to help people, right? You and your doctors that you're working with.
Well, so when I was in early MS, I just got slapped in the face with me or you may drive away and this be our last moments on the planet. Because I watched over and over and over again people just die commuting to work. I'm really thankful for that because it makes me realize that I've only got just this little window of time here. And what do I want to do with it? Do I want to be selfish? Do I want to squander it away? Do I want to stare at my phone the entire time? Do I want to sleep till 3 p.m.? And, what kind of time do I want to have while I'm here? And what do I want to do with my time? And, I figured out really, really quick, like, the best I ever feel is when I've helped somebody else. We just have this innate ability or innate desire to help others. We feel really, really good when we help somebody. I remember the first time I ever helped somebody, and I've just never felt like that good ever. Like it was just addictive, and I had we were wrestling, I had this friend who was cutting weight, and I took some of his mom's diet pills and everybody collapsed down the track. Take him in to the school, show him the coach. Coach was like, this guy needs to go to the hospital. So I put him in a car, I drive to the hospital. And I go through a few red lights, I'm speeding, stupid, reckless, carry the guy into the triage table in the ER and throw him on there and he's all lifeless, like this. Yeah, it turned out he had real bad potassium problems and was having all these arrhythmias, you know what I mean? So the doctor comes and gets me, to basically explain what the situation was, as a historian, and he explains the guy almost died, and that they were able to kind of intervene.
So it was good that you were speeding recklessly.
It was. I should have called an ambulance. That would have been a lot smarter, but I felt like for some reason at 17 I was the only adult in the situation, and it was like that was the decision I made at the moment, was just go. What I handled ideally would have done different to the day, but long story short, I'm leaving the emergency room, and the doctor didn't say you saved this guy's life or anything like this. All he said was, this guy, he was actually giving me a lecture about cutting weight. He was like, don't do this to yourself. It was really the lecture he was giving. But he was like, this guy could have died, And all I heard in my head was, me driving this guy to the hospital saved his life. Whether or not that was reality or not. But at the moment, that's what I felt. And I remember walking out of this emergency room just being like, I want more of that. This feeling right here that I'm feeling, this is the best I've ever felt. It just felt like I was walking on a freaking cloud. And it was weird, and so I ended up reflecting on this. I was actually in a medical terminology class at the time because I had considered doing medicine, but I was actually thinking more athletics, maybe go be a personal trainer or something like this. I kind of saw myself as maybe I'll be a high level personal trainer, but I was like, maybe I should learn a little medicine just to be even better, doing this or whatever. And it was one of those things where it was she was like, well, have you ever thought about actually being an EMT? That's what they do. They drive people to the hospital. You could do that for a career all day, every day. You could do that if you're interested. And I was like, man, that really sounds like something, And I'm driving through traffic and I see this ambulance, and I was just like, man, that does sound cool, It's kind of funny because I didn't know how to go to college or anything. And, obviously, I don't know, I didn't have any help with the process whatsoever. So it's kind of funny because how do I do this? So I go to ACC and I was like, hey, I'd like to sign up for the Paramedic program. And they're like, we don't have one of those, but we'll put you in maths and, English and things like that. You can go transfer to a school that does after you get those things done. And I was like, I'm pretty sure y'all do have one, and she was like, no, we don't, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I've heard that you do. And they were like, no. And so I'm kind of bummed. I'm like, I'm not gonna go do a bunch of fucking math and English. It's stupid. You know what I mean? I'm like, I'm never.
Dude, you don't want to do not what you want to do. You want to do what you want to do.
I wanted to jump in there.
Yeah.
I want to do it, And I was like, I don't think I'm gonna make it through that process. I'm not really into it. So I just kind of like, whatever. So I'm driving home and I go to an ambulance station and I walk in and I was just kind of like, hey, how did y'all become paramedics? They're like, we went to ACC. Both of them had. And I was like, well, I just went there and they said they don't have a paramedic program. They're like, they're wrong. You gotta go to this other campus, go there, talk to them. So I go to the Eastview campus. I walk in, there's this guy sitting there drinking coffee. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to like sign up for this paramedic program. Like, do you know which like person I talked to? He's like, I'm the dean of the program. And I was like, he's like, yeah, come to my office, I'll talk to you about it. And he's like, I actually have one spot left for the program, which starts tomorrow, but you gotta come up with like $400. And I'm like, God, I don't have $400. And he's like, don't worry about it, I'm gonna sign you up. Can you give me $400 like, eventually? And I'm like, okay, cool, I can probably figure that out. So the next day I show up, and I'm like, oh shit, college, you know what I mean? Like, so I walk in, it's completely packed, I'm late, because I was a screwball, like really bad at the time, and I used to just like get on the drum set and play for like hours and then like, miss, classes and things like this just because my ADD was so uncontrolled at the time, It's hilarious, but there was like, I don't know, 60 some odd, people in that class or whatever. And there was like, they're going through, everybody's like introducing themselves. And like some people are like physics professors and like, going back to school to be, like something that they're passionate about, and lawyers and all kinds of like walks of life. And generally speaking, people a whole lot smarter and more life experience than me. And I'm like, no way I'm gonna pass this damn class. Well, after like 4 weeks, like there's only like half of them left. You know what I mean? A lot of people just decide they didn't want to do it or whatever. But the way I saw it is I'm smarter than at least half these fucking people. You know what I mean? When we graduated, there wasn't that many left at all. And I was like, well, hell, you know what I mean? Maybe I can actually become a paramedic. It's pretty crazy. I'll continue on, But it's kind of funny because it's like, it's one of those moments where like if that dude wasn't standing right there at that moment, I probably would have walked around the college and left frustrated and never researched it again. I would have been like, dude, I did more than enough. You know what I mean? I went to an ambulance station. I went and talked to people. They told me, I don't know how to do it. I would have probably still be working retail today.
Probably not. But
I don't know, man. I was done.
choice.
It was just one of those ones where somebody had to like hold my hand through the process. Yeah. It really did, And it was, anyway.
Well, yeah, it was a very synchronistic event.
It was really funny, and the way it went. But anyway, now inevitably, I've done medicine my whole career. And I've been able to do everything I wanted to do. I've worked in every, facet of medicine that I wanted to. Mm-hmm. So critical care, emergency room, flu, obviously working on, different areas on ambulance. Flight in particular was something that I wanted to do early on. And, as soon as I ever saw the first helicopter land on scene, I was like, those dudes, I want to do that. And I just saw it as like this lofty goal that would never happen. I thought maybe like after 30 years I'd go do it for some period of time or something like that. And it was another one of those things where it was like I was looking for a new job because I was in this like rural emergency room that I didn't really like working at that much, and I kind of was just looking for something different. And I was like, I'm gonna put out some job applications, some like different ERs and things like that. And I saw this one job posting, for a flight job, and I was like, maybe I should just go interview at one just so I know what the interview process is like. That way I can eventually like start working on those types of questions, things like this. I go to the interview, and it was hilarious because I'm an idiot. So I showed up like 40 minutes late. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I call the guy, like the CEO dude, and I'm like, hey, I'm like running extremely behind. Should I even show up? And he was like, I'm not going to tell you not to show up. It looks really bad that you're this late, but feel free to show up, right? And I was like, dude, I'm trying to get there. Like, I was like, it just wasn't going well this morning. Like, I'm like, all the stupidest things you can do for a job interview. So anyway, I show up, and they're like, hey, man, you only got like 20 minutes to complete the test, but if you want to give it a go. And I'm kind of like, does anyone have a pencil? Because I didn't even bring a pencil. Like, and everyone's just kind of like, what a like, you know what I mean? Like, it was looking bad, right?
It was not looking
Yeah, it was going poor from get-go, right? And so I sit down, I didn't really have time to think about any of the test questions, And And so I'm just kind of going through and I'm like, man, at the time I really didn't even know, like, there's a lot of questions about ventilators and stuff that I just didn't even really know at the time. And I'm just...
Really? There's lots of specifics.
Yeah, and of course, and so the guy next to me, I'm kind of like, hey, after they make us turn his test, I'm like literally the last one. I'm kind of like, barely even able to like read the question before I'm trying to answer, and then so I go through it, which for me was probably pretty good because I'll overthink shit, because I actually know a lot about it, so I'll sit there and like start reading into a question a whole lot and everything else. So it's really good to just like boom, zoom through it. So I zoom through it, turn my test in, and I'm talking to the guy next to me, and he's like, oh, I've been flying for like 5 years at this system. I flew in from Florida to try to come get this job, super prestigious place. The girl behind me, same kind of thing. And I start realizing every single person in this room is already flying. And I'm like, well, I'm not like I'm fucking hired. It was like a room full of fucking 60 people, you know what I mean? And they're all flying. Like, why the hell do they hire the one guy who's not flying, That'd be dumb, And so I was kind of like immediately like, I shoot up 45 minutes late. And I was like, I should just leave. I shouldn't even interview. This is stupid. You know what I mean? And everybody goes before me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the very last one to interview, And I sit down, and they're kind of like, they start asking me some questions and, and I'm answering them and things like this. But I knew I wasn't going to get hired. So I'm just literally like, this is practice.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just kind of going through the motions, About halfway through the interview, he goes, you're the only person that passed the test today? And you did it in 20 minutes. And, and everybody else, of course, like got an hour and a half or something like this, And I was like, you mean I passed that thing? And they're like, no, not only did you pass it, you scored higher than our medical director. And I was like, and the medical director's over there, and he's just like, yeah, man, you got a few questions I missed, And I was like, I probably wasn't paying attention to that. It was probably luck, right, And he's like, oh, you don't have to chalk it to luck. That's pretty damn good, and for all I know, I literally just had the luckiest, circling ever, for all I know. But I'm like,
question, I got it.
Yeah. And then they asked me this one question. They were like, when would you treat, diabetic ketoacidosis? Like, at what pH would you treat this with sodium bicarb or whatever? And I was like, 7.29. I threw a number out, right? And they're like, did you read our protocols before you came here? And I was like, no. And I was like, it was a guess, right? But it was just like one of those things that like, so when I really read their protocols, like that's the exact number in their protocols of what you treat.
7.29.
Yeah, down to the point, right? Anyway, so, and I was just kind of joking, because I was just kind of like, like I'll give something very specific number, because I was just kind of like, whatever, And they were like, did you read the protocols? Like, holy shit. And I was like, so anyway, I'm looking like some sort of like savant genius to these fucking people. Like,
you're all fucked up.
Yeah. And anyway, so it was just this hilarious.
No credentials.
So later on, yeah, exactly. I'm the only one not flying, like, So anyway, later on they called me and they're like, yeah, man, I didn't see it coming, but we actually want to offer you a job, And they were like, do you think you could not be late, to the actual job, And I was just like, yeah. And they're like, we want to offer you this job. And I was kind of like, what? Like, I was not planning on that. So, anyway, I totally went and did it. But it was just one of those ones where either I just happened to just completely like have that, run the table pool game. On this whole interview process. But I really think what it was like the only time I was uninhibited because I just knew I wasn't going to get hired.
All this started because you made a choice. You were following like this intention. Like you were like, I want to do this. I want to chase this feeling. And then you were just open to these experiences and you're like, okay, that's it. I think that's where I'm going, right?
Being late even played a role. It's just kind of like, what if I went late? I probably would have overthought a bunch of questions, maybe not passed it. Then I would have just been right in there with everybody else. You know what I mean? It's just one of those things where you never know where the fallout, this is something I always try to explain to my patients too, is it's like so many things are like that. So we're like, 3 to 5 years go by and then you go, oh man, thank God I was fucking late. At the time I'm like, this is the worst thing ever. I'm fucking an idiot. Like, this is so stupid. But you give it some perspective and time and you're like, thank God I was late. Like, it's part of the story, and it's a hilarious part of the story, and probably the whole reason why I inevitably ended up doing all of this thing. But that was the thing at the time was the worst ever. Relationships that fall apart. You give them a few years, you're like, dang God, I don't know that person anymore. Jesus, these things. So to me, this is like the value of, to relate it back to where psychedelics and ketamine infusions in general, help is it's like the ability to gain those perspectives sooner. You know, meditation can do this, float tanks can do this, therapy can do this. You know, there's a lot of different modalities, but it's just another way to rapidly gain the perspective you need to be able to move on from something.